Welcome to Positive Recovery MD. If you're listening, chances are you want to create happiness around you and thrive in your life. We're glad you're here and you've come to the right place. This podcast will inspire and motivate you to not merely survive your recovery journey, we'll give you the tools to build or strengthen your foundation to thrive and flourish in your life. Each week, we'll come together as a community to have authentic conversations around addiction, recovery, and what matters. Growth and progress, not perfection, all while developing positive habits for you to utilize in your life. To learn more, please visit positiverecoverymd.com to sign up to receive the daily positive interventions that we'll review, as well as gain access to exclusive Positive Recovery content available only to Positive Recovery MD listeners. All right, let's get started.
Hi, I'm Jason Powers. Welcome to the very first podcast of Positive Recovery MD. I'm super excited. We've got two great co-hosts today. But since it's the first podcast, I just want to give you an overview of what you can expect every week. We're going to cover something in current events that has to do with flourishing in recovery or flourishing in general. We're going to have sometimes really great interviews. We're going to do a positive intervention from the Positive Recovery Daily Guide and sometimes go over interviews. We'll take your call-ins. And let's get going. So let me open up. Julie, why don't you say who you are?
I'm Julie DeNofa. I'm the president of Positive Recovery Centers, and I love what I do. So first of all, I want you to hear that part of it because I do a little bit of everything. I help to manage the clinical oversight of Positive Recovery Centers. I manage the business side of it as well as the medical side of it, and I'm so thankful and grateful to be part of just everything that we're doing.
So let me tell George the story about when we hired her. I don't know if you know this. You probably don't, but so when you hired me back a long time ago, we needed nursing. And we got some great CVs. One in particular stood out. It was Julie's. And I was looking at her CV or her resume, and I thought, oh my God, I should be reporting to this person. So Julie came in and interviewed, and I don't remember what she said, she asked if she was going to get a second interview. I said, you had me at this. and since then, it's been great. And I've been trying to actually live up to somebody that she would report to, right? I mean, it's just, you're so awesome and dynamic. And you say you're lucky to be part of this. I'm just touched because I'm honored that you're part. I mean, you're such a great giver, so inclusive, wicked smart, and we're lucky to have you.
Thank you. I appreciate that. It's been like a really great journey. And when I think back to how the three of us got started with this and was talking to folks about, hey, I'm doing a podcast. And they were like, what's the podcast about? And I was like, it's about positive recovery. It's about who we are and what we do and how we can help people to learn to thrive in their lives. And they're like, how did that get started? And so really, I believe that it all started with a book. And so I would love for George to maybe share that story of delivering happiness, because that was such a great time in all of our lives as well. But I love that story, so maybe everybody would like to hear it.
Sure, thank you. I'm George Joseph, CEO of Positive Recovery. And Positive Recovery is an alcohol and drug company that treats detox, inpatient, day treatment, intensive outpatient, sober living, all levels of care to help people get sober. And it brings back a lot of memories. I think it was 2011, and I was going on a vacation, and I was in the
Aruba. You went to Aruba?
No, it wasn't Aruba. I've never been to Aruba. So.
That's where in the sand.
It was a beach.
That's the story I've been telling for 10 years.
You got it wrong. It's probably St. Bart's.
Okay.
I've never been to Aruba. I'd like to try it. Huh. So we were going on vacation, and I went into the bookstore and got this book called Delivering Happiness. And it was about the guy who started Zappos, a shoe company. So I'm like, what is this going to be about? Is this going to be interesting? So I'm on the beach reading it, and it talks a lot about positive psychology. And so back in the day when we did this, every year I would have a book that every employee would do a book report. And so I gave everybody the option to do this book report on delivering happiness. And lo and behold, our great doctor said, I want to take it to the next level. And Dr. Powers went to University of Penn and got a master's degree in positive psychology. And thus, many years later, we had to name our new company, and we wanted the Positive Recovery name and curriculum to go along with it because it's so effective in addiction treatment.
So can I tell my version?
Yes, because I've never been to Aruba.
So George goes to Aruba, and he had a great time. No, if you're not familiar with the addiction space, I guess if you're in the business, and we treat people with alcohol and drug problems, and they get housed a lot. So we're like a hotel. We're in the service industry, but there's sheets, there's linen, there's cleaning, there's food. So it's a lot like the Ritz. And one of your goals was that the company you owned at the time was going to be a best place to work.
Yes.
And that's granted by the Houston Business Journal, where the employees actually vote. And we tried so many iterations. I remember, we brought in consultants who would...
The talking stick.
Right.
You can only talk with the talking stick.
I don't want to name names, but I remember that guy's name. So we tried every which way from Sunday, and nothing seemed to stick, right? The leadership team would go for a weekend and have an intense meeting, and we would go back and tell everybody, hey, this is how it is. But it was when you actually had people read this book, and the thing that stood out for me wasn't that you wanted us to actually provide better service. It was that Tony Hsieh actually left like $20 million on the table because he didn't like the culture of the company that he sold, but had to stay on in a somewhat dummy role. And he based the new culture on positive psychology. At the time, I didn't even know it existed. And that was humbling. I thought I knew everything about everything. Here I am, a smart doctor. But sure enough, I started to read it like just rabid. And it was a calling, and I couldn't stop. So I remember telling both of you, hey, guys, there's something behind this. And we were probably going over budgets, and they were like, yeah, sure, whatever. But I just went off and created this, and, they were so supportive, but it was awesome. And the application of positive psychology or the science of happiness to addiction was so natural because recovery isn't about just not using, right? Recovery is a full lifestyle. It's transformative. And, I figured that if we could help people thrive, if we could give them evidence-based ways where they can pursue happiness effectively, the chances are their life's going to be more rewarding than the promise of a relapse. And I'll probably say that a million times because that's basically the vision. But I also felt like, being on leadership, which, by the way, is a good story in and of itself because, as a doctor, I was one of the top paid employees. And you put me on leadership, and doctors were just notoriously bad at business. So I had no idea what I was doing. I remember sitting in those leadership meetings, just quiet, trying to absorb everything. And the CFO guy at the time, after like a few weeks, he's like, Jason, you're really wise. You only speak up if you have something to say. I'm like, well, if I opened my mouth, you'd know how dumb I was. I was so inexperienced. But the thing is, my time as in the leadership made me realize that the employees were as much a client of ours as any client was a patient. And that we owe people working in the field more than what we've been giving them, right? There's a high rate of burnout. And if you ask a business owner, what is the single most important asset you have? What would you say?
I would say it's the culture of the people.
The people, right? I mean,
culture, yes.
Right, culture, but the asset,
Yes.
culture's not, it's not tangible, but the people, right?
Yes.
And then if you look at a business owner's budget, that tells a different story. I mean, if you put your money where your mouth is, then you'll actually invest meaningfully into each and every person so that they can develop and grow. And sure enough, that's what we did in Positive Recovery.
Yeah. And so with that, when we read the book, Delivering Happiness, we actually got paid to read the book,
Yes.
Delivering Happiness. And so at first, a lot of the employees were like, I'm doing it because I want that money, right? But the shift that occurred just from reading that book really speaks to the culture. And around that came, because I remember part of the story is we decided through this book that now we need to develop our core values for our organization. And most organizations, when they are developing their core values, they can spend weeks, months. They can hire people to help them to develop their core values. We locked ourselves in a room for one day, and what we came out with was amazing. To this day, some of the core values that we developed back then have carried over into Positive Recovery Centers, and I just think that's awesome.
And it was done by a committee of all different employees, which was really exciting. It was just the leadership. Everybody was engaged in it. And we followed a lot of the ones that Zappos was using. And one of them I really like is having fun, creating weirdness and having fun on the job, because that's so important as well.
Right. I remember going to tour Zappos with you, and they tour the headquarters, and it's not like a million pallets of shoes, and you're not looking at the technology. It's a bunch of cubicles.
It's a call center.
Right. It's unbelievable, but they have so much fun there. And they said, don't take our culture. It just won't work. And we didn't. We did. We created our own. People that have come through and went to other places have asked to take our core values with.
Yes.
That was awesome. And it's been quite a ride,
The impact that it had not only on our clients once we started kind of putting positive recovery out there was huge. And really big piece that I remember is one of our maintenance guys. Do you remember that story?
Yes.
Yeah.
The shed meetings.
Yes, exactly. And so for those of you that are listening, it might not make sense to you, but the impact that it had just changed his life. And so I remember him coming to me and also sharing with Dr. Powers that, this I didn't know what I was going to do with this, but this has changed my life. It has made my life so much better. And in that moment, I remember Dr. Powers saying, this is what it's all about, is changing people's lives.
Right. So the story it was Robert Wingate. I don't think he'd mind using our name. He's a great guy.
Amazing guy.
So he's a maintenance guy, and the rehab was like a bunch of old houses put together. It looked like a wildebeest, right? We had an old Eurotan, a couple houses, and so there was a lot of work to be done, and there was so much, repeat business, and people in departments weren't happy because something would break and then break again. And so Robert Wingate started having these meetings inspired by the positive recovery training, where he started the meetings with gratitude instead of, here's the list, here's a bitch session of like, here's what we've got to do and here's who's unhappy. And he started that, and he said after a few weeks, not only could he feel the morale getting better, but there were so many less repeat jobs. So effectiveness, people were just more effective in their job. They felt happier. And that's great. Yeah.
Sorry, their punch list turned into a gratitude list.
Yeah.
Interesting.
So when I'm talking to folks about kind of what we're doing and they ask me what is positive recovery, I guess Dr. Powers, like when you think about your schooling and the education that you got from University of Pennsylvania, what did the positive psychology set you up to do for positive recovery?
Totally. Yeah. So first of all, I just got to thank George and the company for investing in me to go to the University of Pennsylvania. It was an Ivy League. It was a master's. It was an incredible experience. And what we got to do there is study under the feet of masters. One of them, Martin Seligman, who founded positive psychology. He's probably one of the top 3 most quoted psychologists of all time. He's just an amazing guy. Great bridge player as well. Just never sleeps. Like maybe he's always up like playing bridge. It's not what I'm doing. I'm playing Clash Royale. But like I was saying, the application of positive psychology to addiction was very natural. Here's why. So Martin Seligman's theory of happiness is under the acronym of PERMA, which stands for Positivity, Engagement, Relationship, Meaning, and Achievement, or PERMA. Positivity. You can think of it as your online experience of feeling good, like are you happy? But it's not limited to just that. It's not limited to just that feeling, because positivity also includes awe, tranquility, any positive emotion. Engagement is that state of flow or being in the groove if you're a musician. It's when you just lose sense of time and space. It's the best activity humans can do. Relationships is R, and it's positive relationships. M is meaning and purpose. How much of that do you have in your life? And A is achievement. And think of these as buckets. Now, you don't have to have them all full, right? Somebody like me who's an introvert that feels a little awkward around a bunch of positive psychologists because they're just too damn happy on the outside singing Kumbaya. I may not have, my bucket of P may not be so big, but my M is big, my A is big, my R is big. It can be bigger. So as long as there's something in those, or marble jars, to use Brene Brown's, metaphor of, how much you've got invested in. Now, so PERMA, positivity, engagement, relationship, meaning, and achievement, this is where you find human happiness once your needs are met. So obviously, if you're in a war-torn area or if you're starving, you're not really doing anything but trying to survive. But most of us aren't really living under those conditions. So free human beings across cultures, across time and space, pursue PERMA, and the research shows that people who have those are happy. We study happiest people, what do? And their life is a good is an experiment. The natural application of positive psychology to addiction was reinforced during my studies up at the UPenn, because almost without fail, each of our professors used AA or Alcoholics Anonymous as a microcosm, sort of an example of what they were talking about. Think about meaning and purpose. That's where spirituality exists. Carl Jung, who was, next to Freud, a great Vienna psychiatrist, was one of the inspirations for the 12 steps, and he's the one who coined the term spiritum contra spiritus, which means, addiction is like a spiritual malady. And in his experience, only those who had spiritual transformations got better. Well, of course, I'm in an academic center. We're not talking about, lofty things. We're talking about research. And the thing about meaning and purpose is that spirituality is in that bucket, but it's under the guise of pursuing something sacred. So even atheists and agnostic people have sacred places, sacred people, and these add to your life. And every time, so it's a funny story. The very first day of positive psychology, Martin Seligman calls people out, like 3 or 4 students. You don't know ahead of time he's going to do this. And he has this baritone voice. So, I was, I think, the first one called out. And oh my God, I was going to pee in my pants. Because there was the first day, I was in a group, I don't know, there's like 70 people. I don't feel like I belong. I feel like I'm the dumbest person. I'm looking at these great people who I can't even fathom. And he said, so we'll see if he belongs and if we'll let him stay. And then he had me say my piece. And I was thinking, you mean there's a chance I'm not going to stay? I'm like, damn, I already got admitted. The only way I'm leaving is feet first, dude. Mm-hmm. But I did say, I was in recovery, and then I saw the application of this to recovery. And so when each of our teachers would use this as a microcosm, the whole class would look at me and kind of give me a thumbs up. Yeah. And it's just been great. Anecdotally, people that have gone through the training and have gone elsewhere have wanted to use this curriculum. It is being used at other places. And patients that have gone through this have, and I feel a little uncomfortable when I get praise, but, even still today, there's people that contact me and thank me, and they say it was transformative. And the thing is, it's nothing in here is a secret, right? It's all evidence-based. You can find this in libraries, online, and we don't try to sell a bunch of goods that we're not going to be able to deliver on, right? We deliver flourishing. We give people the tools. And one of the things that sort of drove me to do this was that I was going to work every day, and I was having like an existential crisis on a daily basis. I would get up and go to work. We were working really hard, but outcomes were terrible, right? Relapse rates are high during and soon after treatment. So not only did we owe people that worked for us more, in terms of giving them good training, but I felt like we owed patients more. We owed the field. We have to do something. And so part of, I guess, me coming to peace with what I do for a living and wanting to improve outcomes was, these things help people thrive. And I think addiction develops because people are just going about happiness the wrong way. And it's not that it's kind of a simple idea. And it's not something I came up with. Socrates said, happiness is the only action that human beings pursue for itself. Meaning, money and fame are good, but it's because it makes you happy. So, if you pursue happiness the wrong way, like trying to push the pleasure button too much, more positivity, you could develop addiction. Drugs work in the pleasure center, and there's nothing as natural that can give you that sort of euphoric boost as some drugs can, but it's not the real thing. So obviously, it's not healthy. Engagement is that sense of losing yourself, going into flow or being in the groove. And so Dr. Seligman says the mind's a mess, right? We have this running commentary of what's going on. I have this awesome inner critic, right? You stink, Jason. And so it's just it was great to escape. That was part of what I did. I would escape for myself. And if you do it using drugs or, processes, if you check out, again, that's not real flow, and you can develop addiction that way. Well, then relationships. If you pursue relationships if you pursue healthy relationships, it's really good for you. If you become a better friend, a better listener, positive relationships are like the best resource you have in recovery from anything, from heart disease, from addiction. But we know that adolescents try to fit in a certain peer group and they use substances, or people involved in a relationship that they're really not comfortable with might keep using in order to tolerate this piece of work that they're with. So you can develop addiction that way through R. Meaning and purpose, M. Carl Jung, I would say, you use him as an example again. He said, alcoholics are just trying to, alcoholics that drink are engaged in a low-level search for God, like just trying to fill up that void. But obviously, if you act out and use drugs and chemicals, even as meaningful as it might be to you, and you could take a look at the cannabis subculture, very meaningful. But again, it's drugs. It's an altered state of consciousness. It's not the real thing. And achievement. If you pursue achievement the wrong way, you can develop addiction. And I think back to this commercial in the 80s where this guy in an elevator going in circles saying, I have to work more so I can get more money, so I have to work more so I have to get more money, and just faster, faster. And obviously, that could develop addiction. And I see that it's working. The only thing I regret is that we haven't studied it formally. Anybody listening that is interested in studying it, come on down. I'd be glad for the help. It's not my forte, but man, it's been a great ride. And I mean, you two are my favorite people in the world.
What happens if your buckets kind of aren't filled the same? Like maybe I have a lot of positivity, but I don't feel like I have a lot of accomplishment, or I'm doing great on relationships, but I don't have a lot of engagement. What happens then?
Actually, nothing as long as you have enough, say, right? Like if my R's low, my A and M are high, I don't necessarily need a lot of P.
Because what I found, particularly with taking care of clients, they want to make sure they have enough of each because they have kind of a scarcity mentality where they're afraid that they're not going to have enough of whatever it is that we think they need to have. So that's what comes up sometimes for people.
So I think the job is to, message it correctly, right? And to tell them not to worry. And another thing is, people get well, they want to get well yesterday. They want you to pay for it, meaning, time takes time. If we could bottle time, we wouldn't have a job. And that would be fine because people would be well. But everybody wants to get better immediately. But it takes a while for addiction to develop. And recovery is a process, right? And nobody's going to get to like the happiness level of, say, George over here, King George, right away. It takes time. I mean, personally, okay, so let me talk about set points. So people are born with like a high set point or a low set point, meaning, people that are like natural sun spots. They're just like bundles of joy, energy. They like give life to everybody around them. George is an example. I think I'm putting him to sleep, but but he's just, and you too, I'd say 99% of the time. So
can I jump in there for just a quick second? There was one time when Dr. Powers was going through positive recovery training, actually when he was doing his work at University of Pennsylvania for positive psychology. And I remember going to him with an issue and I was like, and don't give me any more of this positive bullshit. Like, I just need to understand this and I need to vent to you and I need to, and don't need you to reframe it for me. I just need you to be there and not be overly positive. And it just took a few seconds for him and he did a lot of reframing, but he actually saw that what I was doing was overutilizing one of my strengths. Do you remember this conversation?
I think so. Was it curiosity?
Yes.
Yes.
Of course. So, because I had to know the answer. And sometimes there isn't an answer. Sometimes you just have to be okay with the way that it is. And he helped me to see that really quickly. But I hear what you're saying, because the 99% of the time, I'll take that. Because if there's just a small percentage of the time that I might be needing to look at my character strengths and figure out which ones I'm underutilizing and bump those up, that helps me each day to want to do better.
Dude, before I talk about set points, that brings up a good point. Even though this is called positive recovery, it's not all positive. Life isn't that way. There's also the necessity to go over grief and trauma, and post-traumatic stress disorder is a real thing. So the reason why I thought this would be great is because for too long, we've been just exploring the disease, the disorder, the bad.
Yeah.
But positive psychology started to give, practitioners, clinicians, tools that they can use that will supplement, not replace, but add to their toolbox so that they can help people shine, not just remove the bad. Because if all you do is look at what's wrong with you, that's really a depressing state. Even if you get rid of it and you're at zero, that's just not flourishing. But set points are an important distinction because people are genetically born with a range of where their happiness set point is like baseline, right? Somebody like myself, somebody like Martin Seligman, who admittedly is a walking nimbus cloud, just kind of isn't always just ecstatic, and that's fine. And I'll never be a high set pointer, right? My wife, my girls. So I'm married and I've got 2 girls and a boy, and the girls seem to have a really high set point. We started doing this positive intervention called 3 Great Things, which Dr. Seligman does with his family, and I suggest you do. That is, every night around the dinner table, you ask everybody to share, hey, what 3 great things happened today? And of course, my wife, my 2 daughters were like, blah, 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 blah. They had a million things. They were just so happy. At first, my son was like, nothing. You know, I think he was like 7 at the time, but it was a ritual the family did. So eventually he came around and he started doing it. It was like a year and a half later. It was the end of 3rd or 4th grade. My wife went to pick him up from school, and as she was walking out, his teacher called her aside. She's like, Mrs. Powers, can I speak to you? And my wife thought, oh God, what did Daniel do? But she said, you know, I gave everybody, the entire grade was given this assignment, and Daniel was the only one that answered it differently. And she's like, oh God, what? What do you mean? As it turns out, that the assignment was to fill in the blank. When I'm 100, I will, and you know, there's a bunch of things to fill in. And she said, everybody said they're going to be old, achy, blind, you know, have, you know, urinary incontinence, like all these like just negative things, right? They didn't really use that term, but it was just the negative.
You are a doctor.
Yeah.
Right. And she said, Daniel was the only one that said, when I'm 100, I will be surrounded by family, helping them and, you know, loved. And, you know, and so these interventions help us live in the upper limits of what's possible. Again, I don't know if he'll ever be a high set point, or it just doesn't work that way, but you can live in the upper reaches of what's possible while at the same time, you know, looking at also maybe what's wrong and then fixing that. So the word, you know, I think the term positive recovery, to me, it was like a sexy name. It was great. But I also fear that people are just going to think that we stick rose-colored glasses on everybody and say, hey, it's all good, because it really isn't all the time.
But I think it's a great reminder for folks, because what happens when clients first come in or patients first come in, they have a really hard time connecting with who they were at their best, right? Or finding a way to identify like the positive things about them. They can rattle off every bad thing that they've done in the last 6 months. You know, forgot to pick my kids up for school, went through the car loop line drunk, got pulled over. They can tell you all that, but ask them to tell you something about them that's good or something that they're proud of, and they have a really hard time. And so when that changes for them through some of what we do, through the positive interventions and just through the stuff that we do day in and day out, it's so amazing to see.
It's a shame buster. You know, everybody's afraid, like you said, positive. Are they really dealing with the bottom or dealing with the negative stuff? Yes, you deal with the negative stuff to be able to bust through it. The positive recovery gets you to who you naturally are, who you genuinely are. And then whatever those set points are, you grow on those set points. So yeah, maybe happier, more excited than you are when you wake up. But as you develop each day, you learn your peaks and valleys and how to deal with it. And so for me, the addiction in a lot of areas is so negative. We beat people down to help them surrender. Well, this is a way to surrender without necessarily having to beat them down. We want them to see their own negativity, but we also want to see what their potential is and how to flourish. And that's why I've always loved the word flourish.
Well said.
Yeah.
Hey, you're smart. You must have been a counselor at one point.
Yeah, one time I did.
So do you know what current event?
Yeah.
Oh, you're doing the murder.
Murdering.
The murder.
Well, no, it's just that's a good stat.
Well, what they say is weird because Kathy Brady, I don't know if y'all know Kathy. Kathy Brady's brother is the head detective in homicide for Houston. He's the one that did the presentation with ABC and did the article and talk about the homicides, how high they are in the drug-related environment in Houston. In Miami, it's lower. So they think that actually the drugs are getting to Miami easier than they get into Houston, so they're not seeing some of these same issues.
Right. That's exactly what I was going to talk about. In Houston, the homicide rate is up 49% as it was up to this time in the year last year. And it's because the meth that's getting created in Mexico and brought over isn't being created there because they're not able to get the goods from China, like the starting materials.
Right.
So since they're not able to get that, it's not coming here. Obviously, Florida's in a different supplier. So, we talked a lot about people being holed up during the quarantine and addiction getting worse. Well, another side effect is that if you can't get your drug of choice and you create, if you can't get your drug of choice and you go on a spree, like this guy killed 3 people in a very short period of time. He was arrested, thank God, and he knew them. And it's just horrible what's happening. This is a population that doesn't have a big voice. I'm glad that Brady was able to present that, but you don't hear it often enough. You actually don't hear it in relation to how big a problem it is. And it's a shame. It's just one of those things. It's a stigma of addiction. People are underground. It's even worse now. I know most people aren't going on killing sprees, but they're out of sorts and they're suffering. And I just pray that they get the help they need.
Yes. Alcohol obviously is more available, so the alcohol sales have gone up, but the drug use is going down. And so when someone don't get their drug of choice or their alcohol of choice, first step is you get unhappy and you get in that panic.
Right.
And so it's creating all kind of bizarre behavior from the drug side, and then the alcohol side, they get in the alcohol. So we suspect when this starts to level off and people start to realize the level of their drinking, it's going to be a big need for detox.
Well, let's hope that they're around.
Treatment. Yeah, for treatment.
To help.
Even people working at home, they did a study about people working at home and the alcohol use while they're working at home.
Our producer's raising her hand.
Because she's been drinking at home while she works.
Well, yeah. So you wonder why we brought you here, Christina. We're going to have a little intervention. So what we do also every week is we go over the Positive Recovery Daily Guide, and there is a positive intervention on each day. We'll cover one per week.
Don't let the word intervention scare you.
You're right.
It's a positive growth.
Right. I was going to say, think of positive intervention as a tool that is used. Like if you go to a doctor and he uses a tool, a medicine, or taking, like if you're a dermatologist, taking out a mole, or, does a surgery. Surgery is a tool. Medicine's a tool. Procedure's a tool. So for the science of happiness, positive intervention is that tool.
Yep.
It's an intentional activity that will fill up your buckets. Mm-hmm. One or more of them. And so this was ridiculously hard to write. And actually I had to make it interesting enough, maybe difficult enough that I would want to do it year after year. Mm. And just getting through it is challenging. In fact, we offered our season tickets, like somebody could go to a Texan game okay, let me just leave that out. Okay. So stop it.
That's a good story.
Is it really?
It's fine.
Yeah. We challenge them to get through the book.
Right. So we actually offered our tickets. I've got season tickets to the Texans. You've got season tickets to the Rockets. This year is kind of a wash, but if you could, we actually offered this to the staff at Positive Recovery Inpatient Center that if whoever gets through the book 365 days will be eligible. We would randomly draw it. So far, hasn't been a year. I'm interested to see who can do it.
I'm winning, I think.
Are you, Julie? Well, you're the happiest.
Only 99% of the time. So today, today's positive intervention is to list 3 goals that you can accomplish in the next year, 3 things you can do in the next 6 months to reach the goal, and 3 things you can do in the next 3 months to reach the goal, 3 things you can do in the next month to reach the goal, 3 things you can do in the next week, and then 3 things you can do today. And these are according to SMART goals, right? Specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, and timely. Because if you just have a goal with no time limit, that's a wish, right? Or a dream, which is okay, but basically goals are dreams with deadlines, and that helps you achieve them. Writing them down helps you achieve them. Even if you don't attain them, you have a boost of well-being just actually doing this. Or you can have a boost of well-being actually doing this. So I'll go last. How about, Julie, why don't you share your experience doing this intervention? Did you do it, first of all?
Yes, I did.
Great.
So, and I did it recently to do it again. At the beginning of each year, I set goals for myself. With New Year, I don't necessarily set resolutions, but I set goals. And my reason for setting goals, much like what you have on day 1 there, is because it helps me to complete them. It helps me to be accountable. I generally share my goals with my boss or my CEO so that he knows what or how I'm going to stay on track. And we do the same thing at the center with our staff. But my most recent goal is to complete between now and the end of the year, every month I want to complete a virtual race. And so I started this last month and I completed, I actually have props. I completed the Mermaid Denmark race.
Nice.
What?
So yeah, here's my bling that goes along with that.
Yes.
And so you sign up. There's an organization called Yes Fit that you can sign up for. These virtual races, you can walk them, run them, bike them, crawl them, and each one has different mileage. This one was a 22.2 mile, and I walk and bike them. And this was my first one, so I did that last month. And
Woohoo!
yes, and through that you get to see like little fun facts about Denmark, and you learn things along the way because you can kind of check in and see where you're at on the map in Denmark. And right now I'm doing Paris, so my bling for Paris will be an Eiffel Tower. So I'm super stoked about that. And you can actually be on the leaderboard with other people. So if you're someone that tends to be a little bit more competitive, you can see how you're doing with your group. And it's just an exciting thing for me to do. And then, you know, when I get these in the mail, I imagine that I'm going to feel like pretty proud about it each time. Heck, I brought it to work and showed people. So yeah, I'm proud of myself for that.
It's like the Olympics. So I'm confused. You actually follow a trail, or how do you determine what you're doing?
So you sign up for it. You can choose any one, and this one for Denmark, you actually see on a screen how on your smartphone, on your tablet, whatever, you log in and you can see the streets that you're traveling on in Denmark. Little fun facts about Denmark will pop up along the way.
So are you walking, running? What are you doing?
So
you hold your phone?
It's the honor system, right?
Yeah.
You can have it attached to your Fitbit or to your Apple Watch, so it'll take the miles over to it. When I'm actually looking on the streets of Denmark, it's because I'm standing on a treadmill doing it.
Okay.
But if I'm riding my bike, I'm not. I'm just tracking my miles and then counting it towards that particular race.
Oh, nice.
So I might 22.2 miles. That was my first one. I'm like, oh yeah, I'm going to get this done in a week. That was a little bit, I was overzealous with that goal. It wound up taking me 2.5 weeks to get it done, but I got it done in the month. And so this month I'm doing, like I said, Paris, and then the one after that, I'm doing New Orleans, and maybe you could join me in New Orleans.
The Big Easy.
Yeah, that's what it's called. I get it. That's what the medal looks like.
Sounds good.
So if somebody listening wants to participate, what website do they go to?
Yesfit.com.
That's easy.
Easy.
And I'm thinking about opening this challenge up to our employees because you can do that together, and it could be fun. We can have a wear your medal day. Who knows?
Excellent.
Way to increase the buckets of our folks.
Yes.
So, George, tell us about your experience doing it.
My experience is, mine was more travel oriented. And obviously with the virus, we've shut down travel. But one of the latest opportunities I had that now has created the goal is that my daughter's gala was postponed, but they still did the online auction. One of the items was the Stephen Colbert show in New York. And so I, obviously the goal was to get it, right? So I had to watch it for like a month or so where people were bidding, and I finally got the bid. And so for a month I was, every day was the goal is to check and to make sure I was the top donor for that particular item. And then after the item was finished, or the auction was finished, I won that particular item. And so the next goal now is to get to plan it, and then finally get the arrangements made. So I have several goals to accomplish to get to this particular thing I want to do.
Sounds like fun.
Yeah, it's going to be a lot of fun. And then what's so great is my daughter goes to St. Agnes, and one of his top assistants is a St. Agnes graduate. So you actually go, not while he's taping, but you go sit up there with them and you get the full experience. So I'm so excited about it.
Headed to the Big Apple.
The Big Apple, yes.
That's awesome.
It's going to be safer, hopefully, by the time I get up there.
Yeah, invest in some more masks.
Yes.
You never know. Yeah, so I'm not gonna share all of my goals like you guys. I'll share one, and I'm not sure where I read this, but it was somebody in organizational development, I'm sure. But he said when he hires people, he doesn't ask for reference from who they reported to, but who they manage, because if you help those people that report up to you, if you help their career, if you enhance their professionalism or well-being, that's the type of person I want on board. So by the end of this year, as I wrote it down as one of the goals, is to have at least one person consider me a mentor. And, I'm breaking that down, what I can do. So, one of the things is when a staff member emails me about somebody or something going on, I try to put a nugget in addressing kind of my reasoning just to help. So, I'm starting there.
Yes. We're so blessed to have you as our chief medical officer.
Yes, you are.
Yes.
No, I'm kidding.
I'm thrilled.
Yeah,
for sure.
we're very
It's
thrilled.
like the team is back together.
Yeah, we
That's
know
what it
the
feels
band.
like.
We brought the band back together,
Yeah.
and this podcast is fun because it's allowing us to remember things, but also think about the future.
Right. I mean, that's what we are. Like, we're homo prospectus, meaning all we do is prospect. We're just creating what we're going to do in the next moment.
Yes.
And yeah, it's all about looking forward, but we have such a rich history. I hope you guys will join me
Yes,
more
absolutely.
often on this. As a matter of fact, next week, I interviewed George Joseph, and we did it via Zoom. So I do apologize next week during the call that the technology may not be perfect, although it was awesome, so we're going to keep it. So the next positive intervention, for those of you interested, will be to apply yourself to making the next right choice for your overall health, happiness, and recovery. Be brave and industrious. Don't quit before the miracle happens. Practice mindfulness about your small chores, and remember to smile and hold your body in an upright position. Do the next right thing all day, and when tired or in doubt, fake it until you make it. At day's close, journal about your experiences. So each of these interventions will be available to you, as you heard in the introduction, and I hope to see you next week.
It's wonderful. Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Positive Recovery MD, #1 in the books.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Positive Recovery MD. Don't forget to visit positiverecoverymd.com to sign up to get your daily positive intervention sent straight to your inbox. Be sure to subscribe to Positive Recovery MD on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen to your podcast to receive an automatic download when a new episode drops. And as always, if you or someone you know needs help, visit positiverecovery.com or call 877-4-SOBRIETY, which is 877-476-2743. We are here to help.